People in love get jealous. They can be totally vicious. In this really sad case from Austin, Texas, it was jealousy from someone who should probably be a lot more chill that caused a disturbing tragedy. The top suspect has tried their best to get away with it, but could they really run away from it all? Let's find out. Anna Mariah Wilson, aged 25, was a total overachiever, but in a really good way. Also known as Mo, she was born in Vermont, New Hampshire in 1996 and had a degree in engineering by 2019. She loved cooking, writing, and traveling, and all things Italy. She was a big fan of Taco Tuesdays, delicious maple ice cream, and playing board games with her besties. But her biggest love was competitive cycling, gravel racing, to be more specific. That's basically a type of off-road along some really tough trails. You have to be very good to be the greatest, and Mariah was a total badass at this sport. One of Mariah's good friends said that
she was just dominating cycling in a way nobody typically does. She won the biggest race of the year so far to date by almost a half hour.
That's amazing. And in 2022, she turned professional. In April, she had even ditched her full-time job to compete in some of the biggest cycling races. Even though she was really successful, her biggest dream was to use her achievements in sports to make life better for others. She really wanted to empower young women athletes, encourage people of all walks of life to find joy and meaning through sport and community, and inspire all to chase their dreams. She'd also been dating another high-level cyclist called Colin Strickland for around a month. That was back in October 2021. The two of them had apparently reconnected, so while Mariah was in town for a little while, they'd gone outdoor swimming together. This was on May 11th, 2022, which was the night before her next big race near Austin, Texas. However, depending on who you ask, Mariah and Colin really weren't dating at this point. They were just good friends all the way. And her family was also very sure that she wasn't dating anyone at that point. After all, she had a big race to worry about instead. After their swim and enjoying a burger together, Colin said goodnight to Mo and dropped her off at her friend Caitlin's house. Again, the family might not know everything, but honestly, I prefer to think that this was what happened between her and Colin that evening. That they just liked to hang out, you know? So Mariah was staying with her friend and probably wanted to rest the night before her big race in Hicko, Texas. But something awful was just around the corner. On the same night as her swim with Colin, Mariah's friend Caitlin returned from a dinner at about 10 p.m. She would be horrified at what she found. She discovered Mariah, badly injured, lying on the bathroom floor. She was bleeding out from several gunshot wounds. Even more disturbingly, some of the bullets had hit her while she was already on the floor. That sure doesn't sound like any accident. And unfortunately, even though the paramedics did everything they possibly could, Mariah passed away soon afterwards. Law enforcement quickly concluded that poor Mariah's brutal death was a homicide. Her mom, Karen Wilson, said that this is like the 9/11 of our life. But who could have ever wanted to hurt someone like Mariah? And could they be brought to justice? The first person the police checked was, of course, the probably ex-boyfriend, Colin Strickland. It's true that the police suspecting a partner or an ex is a depressingly common first step. I guess because all too often in these cases, the partner did it. Okay, hashtag not all partners, just don't you think it's always way too often a partner in cases like this? But nothing about this case was straightforward as it seemed. And Colin insisted that after he'd seen her that evening, he had left Mariah at the house, and she'd been just fine. He had a solid alibi, so the police quickly realized that there was someone else involved. After examining CCTV footage and Ring doorbells from around the areas, there was a vital clue. A big black SUV had pulled up right after Colin left Mariah at the house. Like, it was there just a second after he left. It wasn't hard to track its owner, and the cops started looking very closely at a former yoga teacher and real estate house flipper called Caitlin Armstrong. Now, Caitlin Marie Armstrong had been dating Colin for around 3 years at that point. But in October 2021, they'd gone on a break. And that's when he hooked up with Mariah. They both loved cycling and were very competitive, and I bet they had a lot in common. But Colin insists that their relationship had only ever lasted for a few weeks. Then he got back with Caitlin, and everything was normal. As I said before, the police probably suspected Colin first, even though he swore he'd never gone back once Mariah had gone into the house. But well, there was a bit more to their relationship than he'd already said. Although they weren't meant to be together romantically, someone who'd spoken to the police anonymously claimed that Colin and Mariah were still seeing each other. So their relationship hadn't finished quite as cleanly as it should have. Whatever you believe, after he'd been on that break from Caitlin in fall of 2021 and had hooked up with Mariah, Caitlin had heard about it, and she was furious. Her rage was so bad that Caitlin bought a firearm, but it was over. Right? Well, it probably didn't help that Colin and Mariah had stayed good friends and kept in touch. Now, the cycling community is pretty small and they clearly liked each other's company, but Caitlin continued to get seriously jealous. Her suspicions grew so toxic that Colin was hiding Mariah's phone calls and texts under another name on his phone. That's also because Caitlin was always blocking Mariah's number, so yeah, this is a really messy three-way nightmare relationship full of red flags, both from one side and the other. But that at least meant that the police now had a really good idea of where to start investigating. The footage of the car right by the house was pretty hard evidence, so they brought Caitlin into the station for questioning. To do that, they arrested her under another outstanding warrant. This was for theft. Of all the things to be arrested for, this was after she'd skipped out on a $650 Botox bill. I mean, that's both hilarious and sad. Am I right? Not a good look, really. When the investigators asked her about her black SUV being spotted in the area right before the shooting, Caitlin just rolled her eyes and pretty much ignored the question. But she never fully denied that the car belonged to her. She was otherwise pretty quiet, and her body language was very still during the interview. But the cops were still pretty sure they already had the killer. Unfortunately, that first arrest warrant had wrongly recorded Caitlin's date of birth, and it didn't match her file on the system. Because of that stupid technicality, the authorities had to let her leave that interview more or less whenever she wanted. And of course, she left the police station as fast as she possibly could. This was really a terrible mistake because there was just no way for the investigators to hold her at the station or question her for longer. They had really hoped to hold her so she could ultimately be charged with ending Mariah's life once they had more evidence at least. A few days after that first interview, on May 17th, 2022, the cops grew suspicious enough to search Caitlin Armstrong's property. That's when they found the same firearm that had ended poor Mariah's life. Apparently, it was a significant match. You've probably guessed that by then, it was already too late. Once they were ready to charge her, a full week after that first interview, they came to arrest Caitlin. And by then, their number one murder suspect had totally disappeared. So would she get away with it? The investigators soon found that Caitlin had caught a plane to Costa Rica. She'd changed her appearance and used a passport that belonged to her sister. I mean, she did look very similar to her. So now they were hunting a real fugitive. It turns out that Caitlin was surprisingly resourceful. She sold her car to pay for her new life and lived in a hostel where she could make that money last. As it was only $12,200, I guess she really had to cut back on luxuries. That's her basic red bed on the bottom bunk. It's definitely a frugal way to live.
She was doing everything possible to really stay off the radar with law enforcement officials, believing that, going to a foreign country that she could escape apprehension.
She also had enough sense to change her hairstyle, cutting it short and dyeing it dark brown. Well, it must have been hard for her to do that, as she did win Best Hair in 2005. That's when she went to Stevenson High School. No, really, she totally did win this. She worked fast while she was sneaking away, and she was already carving out a new life for herself. She had found a new home and was laying low in the very small town of Santa Teresa, which is a remote part of Costa Rica. She started working at a super cute place called Don John's Surf and Yoga Lodge. It's the kind of chilled out luxury retreat where celebrities like Tom Brady and supermodel Giselle like to hang and relax. I guess they also like to hide from the rest of the world, but hopefully for very different reasons. All the same, perhaps it wasn't quite as low-key as she was hoping. And honestly, I'd like to hang out there too. Cocktails, sand, and yoga really looks like paradise to me, as long as no one else there is a potential bad guy. Oh, and Caitlyn also paid for some plastic surgery while she was in hiding. That's super calculated. I mean, what is she, a freaking James Bond villain? This is the receipt from her nose job. That little visit cost like over $6,000, which was half of her on the run money, and it simply wasn't worth it. Although she did seem to be trying to earn it back with her old yoga practice by learning a new skill.
You know, her hobby, her career, being in the yoga practice, we believe that she was trying to learn some type of new yoga, possibly to instruct.
So just how did she get caught after all her careful planning? Well, her case became a major case, which meant that a lot of U.S. Marshal resources were thrown into catching her. And the investigators had already uncovered footage of her catching a plane from Newark Airport, New Jersey. She'd gone there from Austin and was clearly trying to escape more questions. From here, it didn't take very long to trace the fake passport she'd used. She was found pretty soon, really, and was formally arrested by Costa Rican police officers on June 29, 2022. This witness, Zachary Paulson, described how it happened.
She was just asking about how to get around cheaper, and then the police came.
Remember, this was after being on the run for 7 weeks. She was very quickly deported all the way back to the United States. And once she was back on US turf, she would have a heap of explaining to do. Now, there's always a risk of a loophole during the arrest if it looks like the cops didn't do it properly. In this case, the cops didn't read her the Miranda rights. Yes, you've probably seen in every cop movie or show ever. Of course, Caitlyn's lawyers didn't hesitate to exploit this mistake, and now they're trying to hide or at least void some crucial evidence in the case, because they also claim it was obtained without the right warrant. Paperwork strikes again. Ugh. There's still time to get this right. At the time of this video, the trial is meant to go ahead on June 23rd, 2023, and I can't wait to see what the verdict is. Obviously, I still don't know for sure if Caitlyn Armstrong really did it. And while everything she's been caught doing looks super sketchy, there's still that little thing called innocent till proven guilty. Which, trust me, you'd want to if you were ever put on trial. So while it's frustrating, and even if the suspect kind of really looks like they did it, well, right now, I just can't say for sure what will happen to Caitlyn in the end. Maybe next time, someone shouldn't try and hide somewhere with an extraction treaty, like, unfortunately, another case we covered where a total creep took the life of Haley Anderson, a student nurse, and then ran away to Nicaragua. Only that still totally backfired, and he had a really bad time over there. Maybe take a look at that video too and see what you think. But back to poor Mariah. At this point in early 2023, her family is still recovering from the awful shock of what happened to her.
We are absolutely devastated by the loss of our beautiful daughter and sister, Anna Mariah Wilson. There are no words that can express the pain and suffering we are experiencing due to this senseless, tragic loss.
It was totally senseless and so tragic, and she sounds like she was kind of an amazing person. In 2015, she wrote that she wanted to be the kind of person that picks other people up when they fall down, who's there for people when they need support, encouragement, and inspiration. In the meantime, at the time of this video, there's still a GoFundMe available. So even though she's gone, her family really hopes that she can still inspire others to live their best lives. Just search for the Mariah Wilson Foundation if you'd like to donate and support it. It's going to be really hard for her family to wait until June for some kind of closure, and I hope you keep coming back to this channel to learn more about Caitlyn Armstrong's murder trial. Hopefully, that will be the final end to this really sad case. What do you think about this case? Do you think that Caitlyn might not have done it? And if she didn't, then why did she run away? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below.